Loving Sai Ram and greetings from Prashanti Nilayam. Today I would like to say something about the Sri Sathya Sai drinking water project. There is hardly anyone in the Sai family who has not heard about the project, but the question is, how much do we know about it? I can tell you frankly that till recently I knew very little about it, though I witnessed the inauguration of the project 7 years ago and have been drinking the water provided by the project ever since. Recently, I got involved with some documentation work about the project, and that was when I really started to get a feel for what the project was all about. And just a few days ago, I went with a photo and video team to some of the project sites. The temperature was only 110 degrees Fahrenheit out there in the sun. And that was when I really got a feel for the magnitude, the depth, and also the multidimensional aspects of the project. Maybe I should begin from the beginning. Anantapur district, which is where Puttaparthi is located, is one of the arid districts of the state of Andhra Pradesh. It forms a part of the vast rain shadow region that lies to the east of the Western Ghats. Whereas the Western Ghats get abundant rain during the monsoon months, that is from June to September, in the rain shadow region there is very little precipitation. For example, Agumbe on the west coast gets as much as 4,000 millimeters of rain during the short season. And I can tell you that's an awful lot of rain. There are very few places in the world that get so much rain. But Anantapur district gets less than 400 millimeters of rain, and that is in a good year. In a bad year, of course, it's much less. This dry region of Andhra Pradesh goes by the generic name of Rayalaseema. I remember as a boy reading in the newspapers about drought in Rayalaseema. This happened practically year after year. There would be the usual photographs that bring tears to the eyes, but are forgotten the very next day. Hardly anyone bothered about the problems of the people who lived in the villages of the Rayalaseema region, but then whoever cares about the poor, except God that is. And so it happened that God in human form, who was himself born in a small hamlet in this dry and backward region, decided to do something about this perennial problem. On 22nd November 1994, there was a function in the Purnachandra Hall to honor a leading surgeon who had performed the first ever surgery in Swami's hospital in Puttaparthi. The guest of honor on that occasion was Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao, the then Prime Minister of India and a son of Andhra Pradesh himself. In the divine discourse delivered on that day, Swami drew pointed attention to the plight of the people of Rayalaseema and threw a veiled challenge to the government to do something to solve this perpetual problem. Baba added that if the government was forthcoming, then he would help to the maximum extent possible. Well, you know how it is. Mountains might move, but the government does not, at least not until many years have passed and much pressure has been applied. Swami waited for a few months, and then in the month of March in 1995, he told the officers of the Sri Sathya Sai Central Trust, "We shall do it. Not only that, we shall complete the project by birthday." It is not in record, but I am sure that the officers must have felt as if they were struck by a thunderbolt. Give pure drinking water to over 700 villages scattered across an entire district, covering a population of over 1 million, and that too in just about 8 months? Where was the money? Where was the expertise? Where were the people to execute the job? And so on, many questions rose in their minds. Bhagwan shook them out of the mists of doubt and simply said, "It is my sankalpa or will that this project shall fructify. Just go ahead and do it." Miraculously, things began to roll, and on Guru Purnima day, barely a few months after start, the neighboring town of Bukkapatnam received its first supply of Sai water. I remember the occasion very well. We were all seated there in the Sai Kulwant hall. There was the usual speech making, and then Swami pressed a button. An electronic signal was flashed to Bukkapatnam by wireless, and a pump there started working. Immediately, water began to flow, and via a microphone placed there, we could hear the applause of the public. And then a village elder said words of gratitude which were carried by microwave to the Sai Kulwant hall. We were electrified, but more was to come, much more in fact. Came November. Mr. Narasimha Rao again visited Prasanthi Nilayam and inaugurated the project that was mentioned in passing exactly 1 year earlier. He just could not believe what was happening. It takes years and years to get a project of this size executed via the government machinery. And here was Baba, who had got it done in a mere 8 months or so. The Prime Minister just could not understand. To cut a long story short, even as the project was being executed, many villages pleaded with Bhagwan that their village also be included within the scope of the project. This way, a few more months were needed to complete all the works, and by March 1996, the project had become fully operational. With this started a new phase, the running and maintenance of the waterworks. To establish the baseline and specific norms, the Central Trust itself operated the project, or waterworks I should say, bearing all the costs till late 1997. And then on the auspicious Vijayadashmi day of 1997, the waterworks was formally handed over to the people of Andhra Pradesh. The Chief Minister of the state, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu, was present, and in his acceptance speech he said that this was a monumental project that, truly speaking, either the state or the central government ought to have executed. Instead, it was left to Bhagwan Sri Sathya Sai Baba to do the job single-handed, and that too in an incredibly short time. On that occasion, the Chief Minister gave a public promise that he would endeavour to maintain the waterworks, in the same sacred spirit in which it was conceived and executed. All this you might already know. I certainly did. But there were many things I did not know, and that is what I shall be talking about from now on. In the cities, we all take drinking water for granted. We expect there to be an agency whose job it is to provide the water supply. We just open the tap and draw water and don't think twice about it, just as we seldom think about the sun, except when it is cold and raining continuously perhaps. But in the villages of India, it's a different matter altogether. For centuries, in places far removed from rivers, the villagers depended entirely on well water. I remember how bad it used to be in our village. The well would run dry, and we would try to deepen the well by blasting. Sometimes, by going a bit deeper, we would get a little water, but at other times we would have to draw blank. In many parts of Andhra Pradesh and in Anantapur district in particular, things are much worse. Even if there is groundwater, there is too much fluorine, causing all kinds of bone diseases. Governments have generally been insensitive to the problems of rural areas, and if the villagers did not have drinking water, then tough luck. And to this day, most people in most villages have to resign themselves to the problems they face, and that is why, incidentally, Swami goes out of the way to help villagers in whatever way he can. Getting back to the problem of drinking water, The attitude of the rulers has always been, give water to the towns and charge them for it. If there are irrigation schemes, then draw a little water from the scheme and supply it as drinking water to nearby villages. More distant villages have to appeal to God. This is the way it has always been, and this is how it was in Anantapur, for example, till Swami stepped in. In fact, barring Swami's project, even today, no village in India that is beyond 25 kilometers from an irrigation scheme has a ghost of a chance of getting drinking water. But where a big city like Bombay is concerned, you can see when you go by train that they bring water from as far away as 200 kilometers. Okay, let me get back to Swami's project. Way back in March 1995, when he knew that the government was not going to act, Swami told the trust officers, it does not matter how much it costs. It does not matter what problems you face. It does not matter how difficult it is. Your job is to make sure that people in even far-off villages get good drinking water throughout the year. Now, this last condition is a very important one. Just bear that in mind, because that set the tone for the entire project. Everything else flowed from this. Those were Swami's orders, but where exactly does one start? Well, it seemed a good idea to start by talking to some knowledgeable people in Anantapur town itself. This was done, and it led to the Central Trust members meeting thereafter the Chief Engineer of the state, Mr. Kondal Rao. Mr. Kondal Rao then came to Puttaparthi and was granted an interview. Bhagwan explained precisely what he wanted and advised Mr. Rao to survey the water resources of the district and come up with a plan along with the officers of the trust. Mr. Rao and Mr. Chakravarti, who is currently the secretary of the trust, then went round checking what had been done thus far by way of providing drinking water and what untapped resources were available. They found that very little had been done. In some villages there were bore wells and pumps, but due to bad maintenance, hardly any system was working. This taught an important lesson that would become useful later. As regards getting water, it was clear that somehow or the other, it is river water that must be accessed. But unfortunately, the 2 or 3 rivers in the district, including Chitravati, remained dry most of the year. So, where was one to get water from? Mr. Rao noted that the Tungabhadra High Level Canal, or THLC as it is often called, carries water from the Tungabhadra River to some parts of the district during the rainy season. This is an irrigation canal. Perhaps this could be the starting point. The THLC cuts through the northern part of Anantapur district, and in some regions it rides piggyback on the river flowing in that part. The engineers who constructed the canal decided to save digging expenses by using the river itself as a channel wherever possible. Thus, in some regions, the THLC looks like a genuine canal, while in other parts, it submerges its identity with a dry river. The THLC runs full for about 4 or 5 months in the year. Once the monsoon abates, it becomes dry. Absolutely dry, in fact, as I saw for myself recently. Therefore, the irrigation authorities have constructed a few small dams in suitable regions where the canal becomes a part of a river. Thanks to these small dams, minor irrigation works as they are called, there is some water even in the dry region, provided the preceding monsoon has not been an utter failure. Even if the catchment area of the dam is dry, there is an undercurrent below the seemingly dry river bed. Based on detailed observations of this nature, a multi-pronged strategy was worked out to draw out drinking water, purify it, purify it, and then make it available throughout the year. Briefly, the details are as follows. In one scheme known as the Penna Ahobilam Balancing Reservoir Scheme, or PABR scheme as it's called, water is drawn from a small irrigation dam about 40 kilometers to the west of Anantapur town. This water is filtered, purified, and then pumped in stages to serve a very large number of villages. The farthest village is about 100 kilometers from the source. Another scheme is located on the Chitravati river, not the river as we see it in Puttaparthi, but about 150 kilometers to the northeast. Actually, over there, the Tungabhadra canal rides the Chitravati piggyback and is preparing to enter the neighboring Kadapa district through a narrow valley. As a matter of fact, a small irrigation dam is under construction there, but it would still be many years before the dam is constructed. Meanwhile, a small retaining wall has been built, and that is what holds the water in that area for irrigation. Since there is no full-fledged dam, the region becomes quite dry during April to June, but there is still some undercurrent. Deep wells called infiltration wells have been sunk into the ground. Water is pumped out of these and brought to what is called a collection well. Since the water that is drawn has to pass through a lot of sand, it is well filtered by the time it reaches the pump house. The water in the collection well is pumped and distributed through pipes to distant villages. Another scheme is based on what is called summer storage tanks. There are 7 of these, one of which is quite close to Anantapur town. These tanks are huge, covering about 100 acres or so. They have tall bunds on all the 4 sides and are fed with water drawn from the THLC during the rainy season. This water is then drawn through a collection well and carefully filtered. It is this filtered water that is then pumped to the villages. There are in all 7 storage tanks, and if the monsoon is good, they hold enough water even for the summer. I recently went to the tank near Anantapur town. It is located in an area where a former king named Bukkaraya had a tank built centuries ago. Incidentally, the town Bukkapatnam is named after this king. In fact, this summer storage tank is called Bukkaraya Samudram. The word Samudram means sea, and that ought to give you an idea of how big the tank is. In addition to all this, there is one more scheme in which infiltration wells are sunk into the bed of the Pennar river. There are 13 such wells, and each well serves many villages. As I mentioned earlier, even though the river may appear dry, there is quite a bit of undercurrent water, and this is what is tapped. Since the water is drawn through a big layer of sand, there is automatic and natural filtering of the water in this case. Incidentally, I must mention that quality check is made of the water before it is released for public consumption. Let me now turn to a few other aspects of the project, all of which are hardly known. Firstly, about maintenance. I said that earlier in 1997, the Chief Minister, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu, gave an assurance that the project would be well maintained. He has been quite true to his word. But this has not happened by accident, and there is an important message here that ought to be given wide dissemination. Now, when the waterworks was handed over, the Central Trust suggested that the maintenance ought to be entrusted to an autonomous water board rather than to a wing of one of the regular government departments. The Chief Minister readily accepted the suggestion, and thanks to the board, there has not been a single day of outage. In India, this is truly remarkable. The governmental machinery is notoriously slow and also susceptible to maneuvering by vested interests. But thanks to the autonomous board, things are very different. Let me explain with an example. Swami has been generous to provide a large number of service stations in every village. Thus, villagers who earlier had to trudge about 3 kilometers to the water source now do not have to walk more than 100 meters at the most. But human nature is such that some people are not easily satisfied. Thus, in many places, the influential try to make illegal connections and bring water to their home directly. Since there is daily inspection, yes, There is inspection in all the 700 odd villages where water is being provided. Since there is daily inspection, cases of infringement are easily detected. The illegal connection is then promptly cut off. If there is repeated defaulting, the water to the entire village is cut off. This strategy has made the villagers into stakeholders. They guard the facilities vigilantly and see that there is no damage, no misuse, etc. They know that if there is a misuse, then all of them would suffer. Water supply would be simply cut off, that's all. They also know that political patronage does not work with Sai Water as it might if a government department was in charge. Now, this is truly a social revolution. I can tell you that such community unity has not been witnessed for decades. I had a close look at the way the officials of the board do the maintenance. They have recruited about 500 people from the villages that are receiving the benefit, and thus the plumbers, the linesmen, etc., who look after the maintenance are themselves stakeholders. The senior officials, for their part, have been so touched by Swami that they work on all days, Sundays included. They just do not want any negative remarks. I am making a special mention of all this because during a United Nations meeting on habitat and water that was held in Delhi during April, a presentation was made on behalf of the Central Trust. Participants from numerous countries, World Bank officials, etc., flung many questions. They were shocked to hear that there was a man called Sai Baba who was ready to spend millions of dollars to provide water and hand over all the assets to the government absolutely free. Again and again they asked, what is there in it for Sai Baba? When they were told that when people feel happy, Baba gets full return on investment, they just could not believe. Then they asked penetrating questions about schedule, maintenance, etc. They were stunned to hear that during construction, just to please Swami, the workers worked even at night welding pipes under floodlight. They were equally amazed that the beneficiaries were awakened to new social consciousness. I visited many villages, and wherever I went, the people were so happy and so grateful to Swami. Again and again they told us, for the last 5 years, we have had absolutely no problem with drinking water. Previously, it was such a nightmare. That the waterworks is ticking like a clock even now, 5 years afterwards, is a mystery to most administrators. Ministers and other officials constantly come to see this new work culture. In many water treatment plants, I saw the workers had taken the trouble to plant trees and plants and make the place look green, cool and pleasant. I must not forget to mention what I heard in one of the waterworks that is near a dam site. I asked the workers there how they remain in touch with other centers. They have a real problem since the wireless set has been withdrawn thanks to terrorist activity in that region, and the telephone has now stopped working. Meanwhile, the so-called terrorists have visited the site and asked for the names of the villages to which water is being supplied. They then went to those villages and checked that water supply is very regular and that the people are very happy. And you know what? The terrorists came back and told the people in the waterworks, "You are doing good work, we will not bother you." In more ways than one, the water project has produced a social revolution. We are hardly conscious of it. We see Swami's hospitals and are duly impressed. They are of course wonderful and they are doing a tremendous service. But there are also unsung heroes. Do you know that the headworks from where we get water in Puttaparthi, a place called Chinnakotla Collection Well, is inaccessible by vehicle in the rainy season and one has to walk about 3 kilometers to reach that site? The maintenance staff do that in order to switch on the pumps, etc. So, next time we drink a glass of water in Puttaparthi, let us spare a thought for those lonely workers over 100 kilometers to the northeast who are giving us this water. I also suggest we all should, at least once in a while, take a walk to the site of the old Pathamandiram where Swami used to live from 1940 to 1950. Near that spot is a huge tank that supplies Sai water to Puttaparthi. Let us stand there and look around and think. This is the holy spot where there are 3 old temples. This is the spot where God come in human form lived for 10 years. This is the spot where Bhagwan Baba had a well dug that provided water for Puttaparthi village in those days. And now standing tall in the same area is a tank symbolic of a multi-million-dollar project that is providing drinking water to an entire district. This is not all. The ever-compassionate Lord has since then given water to 2 other districts, Medak and Mehboob Nagar. And as if this is not enough, he has promised water to the huge metropolitan city of Madras, now called Chennai. Imagine that. Water to a city of nearly 10 million people. Water that governments in 2 neighboring states have not been able to provide for decades. I do not have to tell you about the magic formula that Bhagwan uses, but I have to tell you how his love infects. In faraway El Salvador, Sai devotees brought water to a rural school attended by native Indians. And when the project was completed, this is what the town chairman and the school principal wrote. Dear members of the Sathya Sai Foundation, during 20 years, we received promises from different governments who offered to bring us drinking water. But all they did was talk because they said it would cost over $1 million. When you people came after the earthquake with foodstuff and clothing and asked how you could help us, we said, please get us water. You said you would, but we did not believe you. But you showed us how to work together. Now we have 21 community taps that have been working perfectly for the last 5 months. You people did in a few short months what the government could not do in 20 years. Only God can repay you for this service. So, let us not think of Swami's water projects in terms of dry statistics alone. If you go to the undercurrent of love, you would discover a whole new world. And that really is what we must look at. Thank you. Jai Sai Ram.